The 2018 World Cup is still to this day one of the most controversial of all time. For starters, it was held in Russia amid accusations of corruption, which by that point weren't as common as nowadays. And from a sporting point of view, many important nations missed out, while at the same time, there were many iconic underdog moments and runs. As a consequence, your opinion about this tournament might vary depending on who you were supporting, but in this video, we'll run down the most iconic, disappointing and shocking moments of this tournament, and by the end of it, I'm pretty sure you'll have a newfound love for this World Cup. But before we start, if this isn't the first time watching this channel, please consider subscribing. With your help, we've already achieved 2,000 subscribers, and now it's time to aim at 10,000. Now without further ado, let's get right to it. Before the start of the tournament, many football fans were suspicious that this World Cup would be a failure. Russia's reputation of an authoritarian state, the absence of nations like Italy, the Netherlands, reigning Copa America champions Chile and the USA, plus the typical weather, lowered many of our expectations. On the other hand, many dramatic moments happened before the tournament even started. Salah qualified Egypt for their first World Cup since 1990 with a penalty kick in stoppage time. Sweden eliminated Italy in the playoffs in plain San Siro, and Peru qualified to a World Cup 36 years later at the expense of New Zealand. Without forgetting the debutants, Iceland and Panama, we were on to the group stage draw, and unlike in other stacked editions, this time we were only gifted one group of death made up by Portugal, Spain, Morocco and Iran, which was kinda disappointing but expected considering the various notable absences. Either way, the stage was set, Robbie Williams gave his seal of approval and we were on to the show. And what a way to kick things off. At first sight, Russia vs Saudi Arabia looked like the worst World Cup opening match of all time, but instead, we witnessed a goal fest by the hosts who thrashed the Saudis 5-0. Regarding the other two teams in this group, there were high hopes for a Salah-led Egypt, while Uruguay looked like just a mere shadow of the team that made it all the way to the semis in 2010. But in the end, Egypt were a massive disappointment as despite Salah's best efforts, his nation wasn't able to garner a single point. On the other hand, without any stellar performances, Uruguay still had what it took to advance to the knockout rounds in first place alongside Russia. Group B was the most hyped one, and rightfully so. Portugal and Spain were paired against each other, and both Morocco and Iran had shown that they had the quality to cause trouble against the Iberian neighbors. But here's a twist. 2 days before Spain's first match in the tournament, their coach Julen Lopetegui was fired for signing with Real Madrid without warning the Spanish Football Federation's president, Luis Rubiales. Yes, that Rubiales. Amidst all this chaos, Portugal and Spain met for their first group stage fixture and produced one of the most intense back and forth matches in the entire history of the competition that culminated in spectacular fashion. But from this point on, it was hard not to root for Iran and Morocco. Portugal spent the entire match defending their one-goal lead against Morocco, while Spain also struggled against both nations. In the end, the Iberian duo would progress, but their lackluster group stage performance would serve as a preview of what was about to happen in the next round. Group C didn't have many noteworthy moments. France had qualified in just 2 matches, while Peru, despite playing well against every opponent, couldn't finish above second place Denmark. Group D, on the other hand, shocked everyone. It was one of the most intriguing groups, containing 4 nations that many neutrals were firmly behind of. Iceland created a lot of buzz following their massive underdog run in the Euros 2 years prior, Nigeria had a solid squad and an even better shirt that many random fans were probably wearing, while Croatia had developed a reputation of a team that could do much more. Argentina were still the clear favorites, but once again, this tournament was about to throw a curveball in our way. After drawing 1-1 against Iceland, the Argentinians were thrashed by Croatia 3-0 and went into their last matchup depending on others to qualify. Thankfully for La Albiceleste, the Croatians dispatched Iceland and Rojo scored a late goal in their match against Nigeria to narrowly qualify them to the knockout rounds. In Group E, Brazil had a rocky start drawing against Switzerland, but coasted through their bouts against Serbia and Costa Rica, who wasn't able to produce the same form from their underdog run 4 years prior. In what comes to second place, Switzerland got the better of Serbia with 2 goals by Xhaka and Shaqiri in their encounter in a heated match that kick-started a rivalry between the two nations. Group F felt like a glitch in a simulation. Germany were, at the eyes of most fans, the favorites to win the tournament. They had won every match in qualifying and hadn't shown any signs that they were about to slow down. So when they were paired with Mexico, South Korea and Sweden, most of us thought that the Mannschaft should have had what it took to qualify in first place. But right in their first match, there were signs of concern after a shocking defeat against Mexico. In their next matchup, their performance didn't improve, but a late winner by close gave us the feeling that they were about to bounce back. Besides, everyone was counting on Mexico to continue their good form and beat Sweden, so despite not finishing first place, Germany would most likely beat South Korea and progress to the next round. Instead, Sweden thrashed Mexico 3-0 and an already eliminated South Korea withstood Germany's pressure, dispatching them with 2 goals way past the 90-minute mark. 4 years after humiliating Brazil, the Germans were now the laughingstock of the football world. Group G was, in my opinion, the least interesting of the entire competition. Unless a catastrophe happened, England and Belgium would easily qualify to the knockouts ahead of Tunisia and Panama, with the only question being who was finishing first. Despite Tunisia's best efforts, they weren't able to rob points from the 2 European giants, while Panama were just happy that they were able to score 2 goals. But hey, that ain't too bad, it's still the same amount scored by Germany. In the end, Belgium's golden generation would topple England in their first of 2 encounters in this tournament, but the true defining moment from that match would be Michy Batshuayi's botch celebration. What a meme it became. And to wrap up the group stage, we had the most balanced group: Poland, Senegal, Japan and Colombia. There were no clear favorites in this one, but ultimately Colombia would be the ones on top. And as a testament of how evenly matched this group was, the second place had to be decided on the virtue of who had received the least yellow cards. Japan received 2, Senegal received 4, therefore it was the Blue Samurais who qualified to the knockouts, ending Senegal's dreams in controversial fashion. And just like that, 48 matches later the group stage had ended, and the true fun would now begin. The first knockout match would be a never exciting France vs Argentina. The Argentines were undefeated against France in the World Cup, but France were going to this one as strong favorites. After all, Messi was out of form and his teammates weren't playing any better. But the bout was a thrilling affair, just like the final 4 years later. Against the odds, Argentina put up a good fight and were actually in advantage in the beginning of the second half. But nobody would be able to stop Mbappe, and the French prodigy's efforts would ultimately secure a hard but well-earned victory for the French. Later in the day, it was time for Ronaldo to do what Messi couldn't, and at first sight, his task looked significantly easier. However, Cavani rocked the Portuguese, and due to Fernando Santos' inability to instruct his team to properly attack, Portugal were eliminated. I mean, for f***'s sake, he subbed the defensive midfielder in with 6 minutes left to play and the nation desperate for a goal. But hey, for my Portuguese viewers, if it makes you feel any good, Spain suffered a much bigger heartbreak against Russia. Despite having the control of the match during 120 minutes, the match finished 1-1 and the 2 nations had to decide their fate in the penalty lottery. Akinfeev would be the one who shined the brightest, saving 2 penalties and taking Russia to the quarters for the first time since the days of the USSR. Croatia vs Denmark happened later in the same day, and it was definitely a weird one. After only 4 minutes, the match was already 1-1, and it would continue like that for the remainder of the 120 minutes of play. In the end, luck would be on the Croatian side in a penalty kick shootout where both keepers performed several wonderful saves. The 5th out of 8 matches was Brazil vs Mexico. It was a perfect opportunity for Mexico to break their record of 6 consecutive round of 16 exits, but it wasn't meant to be. There are only a few things certain in life: death, taxes, and Mexico being eliminated in the first knockout round of a World Cup. Though in a more positive note, they would be able to break their record in 2022. Well, kind of. Sweden would beat Switzerland 1-0 and mark their best performance since 1994, but no match, moment or performance out of this round was as unlikely as the next 2 I'm about to showcase. Japan faced the greatest Belgian generation of all time, and as you'd expect, the odds were firmly stacked against them. Many people thought that the Blue Samurais shouldn't even be here in the first place, but less than 10 minutes into the second half, the world was stunned that Japan was leading 2-0. Could it be that Japan would finally be able to go past the first knockout round? Well, Fellaini had other plans, as from the moment he was subbed in, the game completely changed and Belgium started playing a more direct style of football. 9 minutes after he entered the pitch, the Afro Giants scored the second Belgium goal and the game was tied with 15 minutes left to play. Surely the Japanese will retreat and try to take this one into extra time, right? You're absolutely wrong. There were 8 Japanese players in Belgium's final third as Thibaut Courtois launched the 94th minute counter-attack to win the bout in dramatic fashion. Once again, it was also close for Japan. But the unlikeliest of fits was England winning a penalty shootout. It really was a rollercoaster ride of emotions for the English people. For starters, Colombia took the match to extra time with a goal 3 minutes past the 90-minute mark. And after being unable to put Los Cafeteros away in 30 minutes of extra time, the English were doomed to face their worst enemy, a penalty kick shootout. I'm gonna be honest, I'm really glad I had no betting apps on my phone back in the day, because I would have definitely put a good amount of money on Colombia. And Ospina almost proved me and every doubter right by saving Anderson's penalty. At that point, Colombia had their fate on their hands, but they bottled it in dramatic fashion. 2 consecutive misses and an entire nation went raucous. Was football finally coming home? It surely seemed so after they breezed past Sweden in the quarters with 2 goals from 2 promising talents, Harry Maguire and Dele Alli. With Harry Kane as their talisman and such a large pool of talent, the hype was real. But the biggest fall from the quarters that was heard all around the world was Belgium eliminating Brazil. To be completely honest, I wasn't that surprised. Ever since they won their last World Cup, Brazil always crumbled as soon as they met an European nation in the knockout rounds. France in 2006, the Netherlands in 2010, Germany in 2014. Besides, Belgium were no underdogs. They had a squad full of Premier League winners that was simply superior to Brazil. In the other 2 matches, Croatia and Russia thought they were playing a game of handball, and they needed a thrilling penalty shootout to decide the winner, while France easily picked apart the unbeaten Uruguay and progressed to the semis as well. The stage was set for an all-European semi-finals. France vs Belgium, Croatia vs England. France were the favorites, but anything could happen as there wasn't much separating the 4 nations. And the first semi-final was a clear example of what I just said. Belgium and France played an intricate game of chess with multiple chances coming from both sides, but ultimately, France's experience was too big of a hurdle for the Belgium Golden Boys to overcome. In the other match, Croatia looked tired and struggling with fitness. The Croats had played 240 minutes in both matches and they had to endure the stress of a penalty kick shootout in both occasions. On the other side of the field, the English were looking more confident than ever. An entire nation on their side chanting that football was coming home, and with such a high morale, the 3 Lions got the lead early on in the match. But the Croatians weren't gonna settle for another semi-final run. After all, they didn't come this far to only come this far. And after another grueling 120 minutes of play, Croatia emerged victorious, while the only thing that was coming home was the English national team, without a cup and without a medal. 1 month later, and only 2 out of 32 teams remained. France were the favorites, not only due to their outstanding individual talent and masterclass performances, but also because Croatia had played an extra 90 minutes due to their extra time and penalty shootout wins. Many thought that Croatia had 0 chances of winning, and in the end, a 4-2 result painted a picture of a one-sided match where the Croats were lucky to even score. But if you think that's the case,
you are dead wrong.
The Croatians created way more chances during the first half, and the score would be level at halftime if it wasn't for a dubious VAR decision. But that lead gave confidence to the French, and with 2 goals in rapid succession, the result was practically decided around the hour mark. Either way, you gotta give credit to the Croatians. Despite being down by 3 goals, tired and battered, they kept fighting and managed to reduce the disadvantage thanks to a mistake by Lloris. Ultimately, France deserved the win. They were more efficient during the final and by far the most dominating team in a competition marked by spectacular underdog runs and returns to past glory. Modric was rightfully picked as the best player in the tournament, but I can't ignore the incredible efforts of Mbappe, Harry Kane, De Bruyne and Eden Hazard. To sum it up, this World Cup promised very little, considering the controversial hosts and the lack of notable nations, but delivered a thrilling month of action with very few boring matches in the middle. Despite not carrying the same aura as other editions, this World Cup had everything you would expect in a tournament of that magnitude, and I definitely recommend you to watch some of the matches I mentioned here. And that is it for the video. If you want to watch more World Cup rewinds like this, click here. Don't forget to leave a like so I know you want to watch more content like this, and subscribe to never miss the most interesting football discussions, stories, and top 10 lists. Thank you for watching until the end, I appreciate you, and I will see you soon.